The galaxy is vast, filled with countless species and civilizations, each with its own distinct strengths and weaknesses. Among them, humans were always considered physically unimpressive. Fragile, short-lived, and lacking the brute strength or technological advancements of other alien species. Most galactic races had long ago categorized humans as insignificant, no real threat to the grand empires that dominated the stars. Yet, despite their apparent weakness, humanity found ways to survive and even thrive in the chaotic, war-torn galaxy. And while many species ignored the capabilities of humans, whispers had begun to circulate. Among the veterans of many wars and conflicts, among those who had seen the deadliest battlefields of the galaxy, there was one consistent story, one source of fear that sent shivers down even the most hardened warriors' spines. That story was about human snipers. The elite warriors of many alien factions scoffed at the idea at first. How could humans, a species reliant on such outdated weapons, be any kind of threat? In a galaxy of plasma cannons, energy shields, and precision targeting AI, the thought of using projectiles, of firing simple metal slugs across great distances, seemed laughable. But those who had faced them, those who had witnessed their work, knew better. They had seen entire squads vanish, officers fall dead without warning, supply lines cut as though by an invisible hand. The human's ability to strike without being seen, to disappear into the terrain, and take out key targets from impossible distances, was legendary. It was said they could sit in one place, completely motionless, for days on end, waiting for the perfect shot. One such species, the Zilthar, a proud and technologically advanced race, had always dismissed these stories. The Zilthar were among the strongest warriors in the galaxy, equipped with the finest AI systems and military hardware. They had no need for such primitive tactics. And so, when their high command decided to expand their empire into human-occupied territory, they approached the task with absolute confidence. The human outpost in question was located on the edge of known space, a relatively small colony on a rugged, forested planet. The Zilthar had crushed far more significant enemies before. They believed that this mission would be no different. They would land, overwhelm the human defenses with their superior numbers and technology, and claim another victory for the Empire. Upon landing, the Zilthar forces spread out, securing key positions and preparing to push toward the main human settlement. Their drones scouted the area, sweeping for any potential threats. But the forest was dense, the terrain unfamiliar. The humans had the advantage of home ground, but the Zilthar paid little mind to this. They trusted their AI systems to detect any threats long before they became dangerous. Then, without warning, a shot rang out. The Zilthar lieutenant at the front of the column dropped to the ground, a single hole burned through his armor, right between his eyes. The Zilthar soldiers scattered, seeking cover, but no more shots followed. Panic began to set in. How could this have happened? Their sensors hadn't picked up any sign of the shooter. The Zilthar regrouped, and the officers quickly assured their troops that it was likely just a lucky shot, some human hiding in the trees. They ordered a sweep of the area, sending drones to locate the attacker. But despite their best efforts, there was no trace of the sniper. The shot had come from an impossibly long distance, far beyond the range of their scanners. Hours passed with no more incidents. The Zilthar began to relax, thinking the worst had passed. But just as they began to move again, another shot rang out, this time taking down the communications officer. Again, there was no trace of the attacker. The fear began to grow among the troops. They had never faced an enemy like this, an unseen ghost who could strike from anywhere and then vanish without a trace. The Zilthar High Command was perplexed. Their soldiers were the best in the galaxy, their technology unmatched. How could this be happening? They increased their patrols, doubling their security, but no matter what they did, the human sniper continued to pick them off, one by one. The fear within the Zilthar ranks grew steadily as their forces pushed deeper into the forest. Every step forward was taken with hesitation. The unseen sniper's first strikes had left an imprint on the soldiers, and the tension was palpable. Every rustling leaf or gust of wind set their nerves on edge. They tried to keep their discipline, but the snipers' attacks were calculated and relentless. Another shot, then another. Always precise, always deadly. The sniper wasn't just picking random targets. Key officers, communication specialists, and squad leaders were the first to fall. The sniper was deliberately dismantling their command structure. Without leadership, the soldiers became disoriented, and the entire operation began to falter. The Zilthar forces, so used to being the aggressors, now found themselves reacting. They set up defensive positions, trying to predict where the next shot would come from, but it was futile. The humans knew the terrain far better than the invaders. This wasn't a random battlefield. It was a hunting ground, and the Zilthar were the prey. As hours passed, morale among the soldiers plummeted. The Zilthar had never faced an enemy that struck so invisibly, so efficiently. Their AI systems, designed to detect any potential threat, were useless here. The human snipers had mastered the art of masking their presence, using only minimal tech that was difficult to trace. Unlike the energy weapons the Zilthar were used to, human snipers used kinetic projectiles, leaving no signature for AI to track. In desperation, the Zilthar commander ordered a full sweep of the area, sending drones into every inch of the forest, hoping to flush out the sniper. But the drones found nothing. The sniper was either too well hidden, or they had already moved on. Paranoia began to take root. The Zilthar soldiers started seeing enemies where there were none, shooting at shadows and imaginary threats. The commander grew frustrated. This was supposed to be an easy victory. His troops were some of the best in the galaxy, equipped with advanced technology that outclassed anything the humans had. Yet they were being taken apart by a handful of snipers, enemies they couldn't even see. It wasn't supposed to be this way. But no matter how advanced their technology, they couldn't counter the humans' cunning and precision. The sniper strikes were always perfectly timed. As soon as the Zilthar forces began to regroup, another key officer would fall. They tried to push forward, but each attempt was met with deadly precision. They were being worn down, mentally and physically, and the sniper's psychological warfare was proving to be as effective as the bullets themselves. The constant tension of waiting for the next shot was unbearable. Zilthar soldiers, once confident and proud, began to falter. The invaders had superior numbers and firepower, but it didn't matter. They were fighting an enemy who understood patience, who could outwait them and strike when they least expected it. As the sniper continued to pick them off, the Zilthar started to pull back, afraid to advance further into the unknown. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were constantly being watched, that any moment could be their last. It was no longer a battle, it was survival. The Zilthar commander knew that if they couldn't neutralize the snipers soon, their entire mission was at risk of failure. But with every countermeasure they tried, the humans adapted. The snipers were using the natural terrain, blending into the environment in ways the Zilthar had never encountered. Their technology was becoming a crutch. It had made them overconfident, and now they were paying the price. Even though only a few humans were responsible for the attacks, their impact on the battlefield was profound. The Zilthar troops, despite their advanced training, were losing faith in their mission. It wasn't just the fear of being shot, it was the fear of the unknown. They couldn't fight back against an enemy they couldn't see or predict. The sniper's legend was becoming a reality, and the Zilthar were beginning to realize why other galactic species had come to fear human snipers so deeply. The battlefield had shifted, and the Zilthar forces were no longer the hunters. Every step forward felt like a gamble, every movement was second-guessed. The humans had turned the terrain into their ally, and the Zilthar, despite all their technology, couldn't seem to gain the upper hand. They were caught in a game of patience and precision, one they hadn't been prepared for. The sniper's strategy was methodical. This wasn't a display of brute force, it was psychological warfare at its finest. The sniper knew that fear would do half the work, and it was clear the Zilthar were breaking under the pressure. The proud and disciplined warriors of the Zilthar Empire were being reduced to a paranoid, fearful group of soldiers, afraid to advance, afraid to stay put. The realization was setting in. They were not dealing with an ordinary human military force. This was something different, something far more dangerous. They weren't just fighting soldiers, they were facing hunters. The kind of hunters who could wait, invisible, silent, until the perfect moment to strike. The kind who could pick them apart piece by piece, no matter how prepared or technologically superior they thought they were. The Zilthar command, realizing the gravity of the situation, decided to escalate their response. They deployed their most advanced drones, ones capable of thermal imaging, sound tracking, and even detecting slight environmental anomalies. Their confidence in their technology had never wavered before, but now it was mixed with desperation. The sniper strikes had rattled them to the core, and they believed that sheer technological superiority would finally smoke out the elusive human threat. The drones buzzed through the dense forest, scanning every rock, tree, and shadow for signs of movement. To the Zilthar commander, this was a matter of pride. They had never been outsmarted by a primitive race before, and the thought that humans could outmaneuver their cutting-edge systems was an affront to their very identity. With their sensors sweeping the battlefield, the Zilthar were confident that they would soon have their enemy cornered. But the human snipers didn't rely on technology as heavily as the Zilthar did. They relied on patience, instinct, and their deep understanding of the environment. As the Zilthar drones spread out in search patterns, the snipers adapted. They concealed their heat signatures using the cold natural caves, made sure to move only when absolutely necessary, and remained silent for hours on end. The Zilthar, in their over-reliance on machines, failed to comprehend that their enemy wasn't limited by technology's shortcomings. The humans had spent years perfecting their camouflage and hiding techniques, using the terrain to their advantage in ways the Zilthar AI couldn't predict. And so, the drones continued their search, coming up with nothing. The more time passed, the more uneasy the Zilthar soldiers became. They were being watched, but they couldn't see their watchers. Frustration turned to fear, and fear into anger. They began to question their commander's strategies. Was the advanced technology they had placed so much faith in really enough? Why were they still losing troops, one by one, to an enemy they couldn't locate? Soon enough, the next wave of attacks came. This time, the snipers shifted their focus. Instead of targeting random soldiers, they went for the Zilthar drones. One by one, drones that cost millions of credits to develop and deploy were destroyed with single, precise shots. A drone's optical lens shattered, its sophisticated sensors rendered useless in an instant. The Zilthar soldiers watched helplessly as their last advantage was systematically neutralized. These drones were supposed to be the solution, the ace up their sleeve, yet the humans had turned them into little more than expensive liabilities. The Zilthar general ordered an airstrike, a scorched earth approach to wipe out any possible hiding places for the snipers. He gave the command, and the sky erupted in flames as the bombers dropped payloads on the suspected sniper positions. Trees exploded into fireballs, rocks shattered, and entire sections of the forest were flattened. The Zilthar soldiers cheered at the destruction, believing this would finally end the nightmare. But as the smoke cleared, they realized the truth: the snipers had already moved. The airstrike had hit nothing but empty ground. The humans had anticipated this move. They had already relocated before the bombs fell, shifting to new positions with the same deadly silence they had maintained since the beginning. And once the dust settled, the sniper shots resumed. This time, they hit with even more precision. Every Zilthar soldier that poked their head out from behind cover became an instant target. The snipers weren't just killing, they were toying with the Zilthar now, demonstrating their complete control over the battlefield. The Zilthar forces were unraveling. The general, once so confident, could see the fear in his soldiers' eyes. He tried to rally them, insisting that they were still the superior force, but the morale was too far gone. The reality was undeniable. The Zilthar's greatest strength, technology, had been turned into a weakness by an enemy who understood the limits of machines better than they did. Human snipers, with their basic, seemingly outdated weapons, had outwitted them at every turn. In a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control, the general ordered his remaining troops to fall back to their ships. They needed to regroup, rethink their strategy, and come at the humans with a different approach. But the humans weren't going to give them that chance. As the Zilthar retreated, the snipers picked off the rearguard, making sure the retreat was anything but orderly. Panic spread like wildfire. Soldiers tripped over each other in their haste to escape, leaving behind equipment, and even wounded comrades in their scramble for safety. By the time the Zilthar made it back to their landing zone, their numbers had been halved. The humans had turned a well-equipped, technologically superior invasion force into a disorganized, terrified mob. And they had done it with nothing more than rifles, patience, and a deep understanding of the art of war. The retreat was inevitable. The Zilthar general had no choice but to call for an extraction. The mission was a failure. They had underestimated the humans in the worst possible way. What should have been an easy conquest had turned into a nightmare, and it was all because of a few snipers who had exploited every weakness the Zilthar didn't know they had. As the surviving Zilthar troops were evacuated, the general sent a report back to his superiors. His message was clear: the humans were not to be underestimated, especially their snipers. These primitive soldiers had shown the galaxy what humans were capable of when pushed to the brink. The general's final words in the transmission summed up the fear that now gripped the Zilthar ranks. Humans are dangerous in ways we never imagined. They are patient. They are precise. And they are coming for us. The Zilthar general knew the situation was spiraling out of control. His forces, once proud and disciplined, had been reduced to a broken and terrified unit. The snipers had inflicted more damage than any enemy they had ever encountered, not just physically, but mentally. Every step they took, every breath they drew, was clouded by the fear of the unseen, the silent hunters who could strike without warning. In a last-ditch effort, the general ordered his troops to regroup one final time. He gave the command to deploy everything they had, full force, no holding back. They launched an assault designed to flush out the humans from their hiding spots, using heavy firepower, air support, and even experimental weapons meant to disorient or disable the enemy from afar. But it wasn't enough. The snipers had anticipated every move. They shifted their positions just before the onslaught hit, always staying one step ahead. They were like shadows, intangible, always out of reach. The soldiers, despite their training, were gripped by a deep sense of helplessness. Their greatest weapons were useless. The drones, their thermal imaging, even their AI-driven targeting systems, none of it worked. And that, more than anything, broke their spirits. How could they fight an enemy they couldn't see or predict? Every time they thought they had cornered the snipers, they were wrong. Meanwhile, the snipers kept up their systematic dismantling of the Zilthar forces. They didn't fire randomly or recklessly. Every shot had purpose. The humans were in complete control, dictating the pace of the battle. They could have wiped out the Zilthar faster, but instead, they chose to break them down bit by bit, stretching the psychological torment over hours. And the Zilthar, despite all their technological superiority, were powerless to stop it. The general began to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just a battle, it was a message. The humans were showing the galaxy what they were capable of. They had been underestimated for too long, dismissed as weak because they lacked the brute force or flashy technology of other species. But their strength lay in their understanding of war itself. They didn't rely on overwhelming power. They relied on strategy, patience, and the ability to exploit the weaknesses of even the most advanced adversaries. In this case, the weakness was the Zilthar's overconfidence in their technology, their blind faith that machines could solve everything. The snipers had proven otherwise. They had shown that technology could be outsmarted, that soldiers relying too heavily on machines were vulnerable. The Zilthar general realized too late that his army had become reliant on their advanced tools to such an extent that they had forgotten the basics of warfare: adaptation, patience, and using the environment to one's advantage. As the Zilthar continued their retreat, the final phase of the battle began. The humans, sensing the Zilthar were on the verge of collapse, launched their final strikes. This time, they targeted the last remnants of the Zilthar command structure. The general's personal guard fell first, followed by the remaining officers. Each shot was a death sentence, precise and inevitable. The general knew he was next, and yet, there was nothing he could do. His sensors, his drones, his technology, all of it had failed him. And then, with one final shot, the general was taken down. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was quiet, efficient, and exactly what the humans had intended. The last of the Zilthar forces fled, their retreat a complete and utter defeat. The human snipers had won not through sheer firepower, but through complete domination of the battlefield. They had controlled the flow of the fight from the very beginning, using their patience and understanding of the terrain to destroy the enemy's morale and reduce their forces to a disorganized, terrified group. By the time the battle was over, the Zilthar had lost far more than just soldiers. They had lost their belief in their own invincibility. As the Zilthar survivors regrouped far from the battlefield, the full weight of what had happened began to sink in. The humans had taken an invasion force, one backed by some of the most advanced technology in the galaxy, and turned it into a nightmare. And they had done it with nothing more than skill, cunning, and rifles. No massive starships, no towering war machines, just the cold precision of a well-placed shot. A transmission was sent back to the Zilthar homeworld. In it, the remaining officers described the defeat in stark, honest terms. The humans were not the weaklings the galaxy had once believed them to be. They were dangerous in ways no one had anticipated. The officers warned that the humans' mastery of psychological and guerrilla warfare, combined with their sniper tactics, made them a force to be reckoned with. The transmission concluded with a final, chilling statement. "We underestimated them. Their strength lies not in their weapons, but in their patience. They don't need to be seen to win. They don't need to overpower their enemies. All they need is a rifle, and they will bring any empire to its knees." In the days that followed, word of the Zilthar's defeat spread across the galaxy. Other factions, once dismissive of humanity, began to rethink their strategies. It wasn't just the human snipers that were feared, it was the message they sent. Humanity, fragile as they seemed, had mastered a form of warfare that was as old as time itself. And in the end, it was that mastery that made them one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. Where once they were dismissed as weak and insignificant, now they were viewed with a mix of fear and respect. No one could afford to underestimate them anymore. The Zilthar had learned that lesson the hard way. They had come for an easy victory, and instead, they had been humiliated by an enemy they had never truly understood. For the human snipers, the battle was over. They had done their job, and they had done it perfectly. They melted back into the shadows, unseen, unknown, leaving behind only their legend, a legend that would haunt the galaxy for generations to come.